Welcome to Lit Bashing on another very warm summer evening for another video on how best to organise your teeny tiny spacemen into thematic fluffy lists that aren't completely terrible. This time it's the Traitors' turn, and this video hopefully will be a little bit shorter than the Loyalist equivalents, mainly because I'm not going to be going over the same provisos and general explanations I did last time because, well, I did those last time. If you do have any questions about my methodology and reasonings, watch my Loyalist video to see if I answered your questions. And then comment below and on the other video as well with your question anyway, because engagement, yay. But anyway, after the little intro animation, we'll head straight into our first, technically third, Legion. The Emperor's children are my babies. Something about gender-bending, body-modifying rock stars in the 41st millennium spoke to me as a teen getting into the game, and now I'm very much not a teen anymore. It persists through to them being my main in 28mm Heresy. So it brings me mixed emotions to say that you all should be using a formation of them, but none of you should be maining them as the majority of your army. Their special rule caps out after only a single formation, but if you have that formation, you get a free seize the initiative in a turn of your choosing. If your opponent has one big scary unit, use it first turn and get all your first fire shots into that before it can fight back. Or wait until you have all the objectives held and then give yourself a first turn to defend them all greater ease. You can take a minimum size garrison for 126 points or a minimum size Sky Hunter phalanx for between 120 and 140 depending on what units you like. And those both would be very fluffy choices. Early in the Heresy, the Third did a lot of garrisoning and waiting around for their various leaders who kept getting lost on the way to the battle. Later in the Heresy, they'd started leaning more into their more modern reputation of speed and elegance and leaning into the vanguard units that those represent. These formations both have a few extra optional slots to fit in a flyer or a heavy tank you couldn't quite fit anywhere else, making it a good utility formation for models you want to use but can't fit in available slots in your main force. Would you pay 120 points to steal the initiative in a turn of your choice? Yes, probably. The fact you can do that and still get those 120 points worth of models makes it a bargain. The only reason not to do this at super competitive levels is that's 120 points you're not spending on missile launchers or Alpha Legion, but even then, it's certainly worth the experiment. Plus, you get to paint lots of pretty purple. So, every Legion appreciates them rules-wise, but who do the Emperor's children pair well with fluff-wise? Well, depending on when you set your army, most of them. They don't like the Night Lords, but then no one likes the Night Lords. Even the Night Lords don't like the Night Lords. But play early Heresy, and you've got fluffy access to all the first Traitor Legions, Sons of Horus, Death Guard, and, even though they'd hate each other by the end of the day, the World Eaters, who fought shoulder to shoulder with them in the early hours of the Heresy. In the fluff, they never really spent much time with the Thousand Sons, but as traitors, if the War Master commanded it, so it would be. Same for the Space Wolves, but without the War Master excuse, so that's less likely. But otherwise, paint their shoulder pads black and play them alongside Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, or Alpha Legion, or paint their shoulder pads white and play them alongside any other Loyalists, especially Iron Hands and Salamanders. The Emperor's children are the closest the traitors get to Salamanders in that they'll play nice with nearly anyone and be an asset to nearly anyone. So sad times that I can't recommend them for a main force, but no one should be without a sneaky 120 points of purple on their team. Iron Warriors are the in thing at the moment, being the poster boys / main villains of the upcoming book and narrative on Talon. These are the evil gods who wiped all life from the surface and drove the survivors underground. Iron within, iron without. These guys are all about their technology. Vehicles, drills, tanks, super heavies. The more flat surfaces a mini has to paint hazard stripes on, the more it will please Perturabo. So it is with bafflement that their Legion rule makes infantry and walkers scarier and doesn't touch vehicles at all. Oh well, it's not the worst rule, making infantry and walkers objective holding strength 1 better, and the addendum means that if doing so in a deployment zone, either yours or your opponent's, this reflects their siege tactics well. both holding forts and destroying forts alike, gets even better. But still, it's weird that the rule essentially punishes you for taking vehicles, painted how vehicles should be painted, or at least keeps them neutral. Then again, very few Legion rules affect vehicles, so maybe it's a balance thing. But to be honest, for balance, infantry don't need the boosts. They're doing fine. Anyway, best way to use these stripy boys is to focus on taking and defending objectives. Max out your infantry ready for siege warfare. Garrisons are fluffy but lack any special rules and don't allow transports, so generally a demi company will be fine and give you the rhino slots to get your siege warriors to the objective where they need to be. Missile launchers are obviously the best choice for defence and attack, but Terminators are solid too, and can deem strike in. Or, if you're dedicated to fluffy, brutal traitors, the Iron Warriors are one of the first 3 legions to get a formation of legend in the new book. The awkwardly named Proixis Macro Assault Wing, if the articles are to be believed, which is lots of Terminators and lots of Spartans, giving the Terminators an extra +2 close assault factor on the turn they disembark their transports, which means they'll be tearing apart pretty much anything that's in combat that doesn't have rend, and even then they'll hold their own. It's pricey, and you don't get the opportunity to take Contemptors, which you will want to do, but it's an option if you're dedicated to the fluff. Otherwise, max out your missile support tactical squads for your core, max out Contemptors for your support, take Terminators if you like them. For allies, Iron Hands rules does impact tanks, so you could ally them in if you want to use tanks, but it seems sacrilege to suggest bringing in hands to ride the tanks that the warriors should be riding. They hate the Imperial Fists, so don't do that, and where both rules impact infantry primarily, there's not really much point to it anyway. And they love the World Eaters, so if you're not using the Iron Warriors special close combat formation, taking World Eaters, jet bikes, or assault marines isn't a bad shout. All other relationships are so-so fluff and rules-wise, so flexible in general, good at holding the fort, but annoying that there's nothing for the vehicles that you have, meaning the iron within is pretty great. The iron without, you can do without. The Millwall Football Club of the 31st millennium, no one likes the Night Lords, and they do care, they just bottle it up until they can express it via murder. Just like Millwall Football Club. Well, that's not entirely true. The Death Guard get along pretty well with them, as they both like skulls, so presumably they go hit up Hot Topic together at the weekends, and they're not a bad shout to ally with them, but we'll get to that in a minute. The Night Lords have a wonderfully fluffy rule. As the assassins of the group, they get a bonus if they're able to take down a commander model whilst he's commanding. Models in this game, especially Solar Auxilia due to their chain of command, generally want to be close to their commanding officer. It gives them feel no pain bonuses, tactical flexibility, better morale, and the Night Lord's rule punishes them for it. If they are able to take out a strategically important HQ choice, each detachment within 4 inches, which is a weird distance, but okay, takes 3 times the wound characteristic of that model as hits. Most of the time that will be 3 hits, but if you happen to have a tank commander in a Kratos or a Baneblade, 6 hits. And the only saves that can be taken are basically morale checks. No invulnerable or cover can count, and this check happens at -2 for a broken detachment. Mark my words, if you only ever main Night Lords and play games even regularly frequently, you are going to win a game thanks to this rule, and it will be glorious. But the vast majority of games, it's going to do nothing. But that one game where it does pop off, most armies are going to have 3 or 4 commanders, and 9 out of 10 times this rule will just force your opponent to spread them out a bit more. So, yeah. But still, the reason you take Night Lords isn't to win. It's to lose and develop vendettas against everyone you play against. Again, they're Millwall. But also, because you want to show off that you can paint 8mm lightning bolts, so do it anyway. Taking an allied detachment of Death Guard, their only friends, isn't a bad shout, as making opportune bits of terrain dangerous might force your opponent's units closer together, allowing for more morale bombs, but then you don't get to paint as many lightning bolts, so swings and roundabouts. The World Eaters are my 8mm biggest force, and the most competitive option we've discussed so far. Like most rules, they do nothing for tanks. But why would World Eater want to be in a tank? How are you going to feel your opponent's blood and viscera splat against your bare arms if you're in a tank? No, the only reason for tanks in a World Eater's army is to transport you closer to the opponent so you can then leave the tank and hit them in the face. For example, for around 1900 points, basically a whole army, depending on how many extra weapons you take on the Spartans. You could field 24 Assault Marines spread across 3 Thunderhawks, 24 Terminators and 12 Legionaries, plus their commander spread across 13 Spartans, which is absurd. It's one of the scariest things I can think of in lore and on the table. Support this with another pure Jet Bikes Vanguard formation to make it a legal force, maybe a War Master Titan or Iconoclast if you're feeling particularly fluffy, and you could still fit in a minimum size garrison of Emperor's Children in a 3k game for that free initiative turn. Alternatively, make up the lack of helpful tanks the World Eaters have by allying in Solar Auxilia. In any case, get up close, wreck face, using your free reroll in every combat. Even if you crash and burn to Overwatch, no one is going to forget the army that sent 24 World Eaters Assault Marines in Thunderhawks at them. The 14th Legion is the Death Guard, and they are the army that Games Workshop chose to be the poster boys for the whole of the Astartes in Legions Imperialis up to, well, now, really. Which I always thought was an interesting choice. They're not the most visually appealing, nor the simplest to attract people in, and generally people pictured them in Mark II or III rather than 6, which Legions mostly uses, so yeah, interesting choice. How are they in game? Well, similar to the Emperor's Children, their ability caps out at 1 formation, sort of. You get to nominate 2 areas of terrain or 2 structures, and those become dangerous if you have a Death Guard formation on your team. Whilst you yourself, being Death Guard, don't care about that, and can move through any dangerous terrain, no problem. There are plenty of boards and missions where this can be excellent. Sub-objectives that require objectives being moved in a certain direction, you can really make your opponent's routes long-winded or risk taking wounds. Make your opponent's deployment zone full of dangerous terrain, and you can force them to retreat into danger. If you know the board you'll be playing on features a lot of dangerous terrain anyway, make it even more dangerous, and make sure you aren't affected at all. It's a tactical choice, and not as limited to a minimum size formation like the Emperor's Children, because even though you can only get 2 areas of terrain dangerous, it's only your Death Guard models that can move freely through it, so there is some merit for taking a larger chunk of your force as Death Guard. In terms of what a fluffy Death Guard force looks like, early in the Heresy, Loyalist Death Guard were the armoured companies, and Traitors were the Terminators and Walkers. So fluff could help make your decisions there. Interestingly, going by the Allies in the Age of Darkness table, the Death Guard liked allying with the Night Lords, but the Night Lords didn't reciprocate as well. But they still didn't hate each other. Otherwise, the Death Guard only played especially well with the Sons of Horus. Everyone else was much of a muchness if the mission called for it situation. Allying with the World Eaters, previously mentioned, making sure your Assault Marines and Thunderhawks aren't in contact with the ground long enough to worry about the terrain isn't a bad shout. Just don't ally them with Thousand Suns, because it's not fluffy, and also they're rubbish. But anyway, Death Guard are a solid, middle-of-the-road choice. Maybe that's why they're the poster boys. Smelly, but solid. Like a healthy poo. The Thousand Sons of the 15th Legion. How do we represent a legion famed for their psychic powers in a game with no psychic mechanics? Give them a kind shield, apparently. Your commander and every detachment within 6 inches, which is not a weird distance, gets a 6+ invulnerable save. This is okay. Sort of a reverse Night Lords, except you aren't allowed to use an invulnerable save against the Night Lords. In any case, it's not a great power. But if you know you're up against a lot of AP, then it's not the worst. It guarantees you a save if you have enough commanders. So I suppose building around the Thousand Suns as our main, you'd be looking at lots of small formations, so you can get as many HQ choices as possible to ensure you're covered. However, remember the kind shields, rules-wise, are shield generators, and they affect all units within 6 inches, friend and foe, so you won't want to be going into close combat due to handing those same benefits to your opponent, who likely also has another better rule on their side. So in terms of allies, you want someone who can fill that close assault gap. Definitely not Space Walls for all kinds of reasons, and they also weren't particularly close with the Death Guard. But everyone else, at least during the Heresy, is a possibility. Ally with some World Eaters and give them offense whilst you take the defense, or grab a whole bunch of Solar Auxilia Rend infantry like Ogrins and Belisarius. There are much worse options. Generally, the Thousand Suns aren't going to be super competitive, so I say lean into the fluff. They had no battle brothers. They were forced into the heresy by bad decisions and an opportunistic warmaster. They were victims of the machinations beyond their control that they would someday come to worship. Go all in with as many HQs as you can squeeze and long-range firepower, modelled to look like psychic powers, and cover everything in a shield. Have fun. Our boss and Lord Commander, the Sons of Horus, have what seem to be on paper a very specific circumstance kind of rule. It has to be a Sons of Horus model with an advance order, not first fire, shooting at a target within 6 inches, using a light or a light AT weapon. Then it gets to reroll 1s to hit. That's a lot of provisos. However, fun times, not just infantry for once, not even just infantry and walkers. So that means even advancing tanks. If you have anti-infantry tanks, they get the bonus for being up close. These guys seem designed to be the beginner choice for the traitors, and that's not a bad thing. Advancing is the default order. If you forget to give an order, that's the one they have. All your infantry weapons are light or light AT. These guys are, in my opinion, the best argument for drop pods, and the best argument for palisade pods amongst them. Deep strike in, advance to within 6 but still under your shield, shoot with all the guns in the world, re-rolling 1s. If you can't afford or get the drop pods, rhinos are pretty good too, and can drive around after deploying their cash. Overall, I think the rule is a little underpowered, but re-rolling all misses would seem a little overpowered. I don't know. Middle of the road, but potentially very effective if played tactically. Easy to use, but an effort really to get the most of. The advantage of the Sons of Horus from a fluff perspective is no one wouldn't work with them. They particularly worked well with the Emperor's Children, Death Guard and Word Bearers from a traitor point of view, and the Blood Angels trusted them long enough into the heresy before it became clear just how many strings the Warmaster was holding. Rules-wise, longer range firepower would be good. Not that there's many rules that go well with that. So some good defensive Death Guard to control the battlefield might be a good shout, and fluffy. Same with the ever-excellent Emperor's Children in a garrison. Fill it up with tarantula batteries and fill up your board edge for ongoing passive murder throughout the game, and get free initiative for it. For the first time in the context of long-range firepower and fluffy allies, I'm going to specifically mention Titans because they mesh very well with the Sons of Horus. The Legio Mortis being explicitly allied to the Warmaster and wearing his eye as heraldry from the moment the heresy started. It plugs a gap in the army and is just about as fluffy an ally as you can get. Word Bearers. From the nominal originators of the heresy to the arguable actual originators of the heresy. What can the weaselly Word Bearers offer an Astartes Legion army? They never break, or technically don't count as broken for the purposes of orders, which might be a more important rule than it seems in the games I've played, because if there's any rule that just tends to get forgotten during play, it's remembering to keep track of breakpoints. But playing properly, this might be useful. Also, they're immune to Dread Aura, which might be useful if you're facing one of the 3 people who own and run Sinister Titans. Generally, these guys have one of the least effective rules in the game, giving the Space Wolves from the last video a run for their money. They also only really played well with the Sons of Horus. Everyone else, for good reason, distrusted them, traitor and loyalist. But they're not an awful shout for that ranged weapon allied legion if you need one for your Sons of Horus. Or, what they're really known for is manipulating lesser minds. Lesser meaning, of course, not Astartes. If you want to be super fluffy, have these as the allied Astartes for a traitor auxiliar force, representing the hordes of human worshippers that have been drawn to the side of the dark gods, and the word bearers are their priests and envoys. But, as a whole force of word bearers, do it if you like the Legion, but don't do it for a competitive army. Finally, the Alpha Legion. They're the best Legion in the game. They're amazing strategic mutable tactics, offering even tanks some kind of movement advantage is just so good. Basically anything but flyers benefit from these guys. And they're so subterfuge and unknowing in what they actually want. No one knows who they really serve. They present as traitor, but so many people think this is a front to bring down the heresy from the inside. Then other people think that they're triple agents or quadruple agents, basically except the World Eaters, for whom all this subterfuge is too tricky and not enough chainsaw in the facey, anyone will be grateful for the day the Alpha Legion have decided they should be on your side for once, regardless of whatever that reason is. They are the Astartes' way of getting pioneer formations, and we know how good they are for the Auxilia. This is the Astartes' way of getting them, but even better. Interestingly, infantry, cavalry, walkers, and vehicles can be given infiltrate, outflank, or forward deployment, and flyers can't be chosen. But other types just get forward deployment. But Astartes don't have any other types, I don't think, so I don't know what that's future-proofing against. Fun to theorise. In any case, take as many small detachments as possible. If you keep to the minimum unit size, you'll end up being able to infiltrate pretty much every unit in your army. There is some rules as written discussion about whether HQ detachments take up a separate selection of this, and if transports take up a separate selection of the 3 detachments you can choose, in which case to put a tactical detachment with a commander in dedicated rhinos in infiltrate, that would take up all 3 of the mutable tactics per formation allowed by your rule, which doesn't seem right, but does seem to be rules as written based on when detachments are declared to be in vehicles, etc. But even then, it's still worth it. Any allies or other legions you take, which can be any except World Eaters according to Fluff, really just take up more points than you could be using on more Alpha Legion. Fluff-wise, they pair well with pretty much anyone. Rules-wise, they pair up well with long-distance range that might not benefit so much from infiltrate. Maybe Imperial Fists or Word Bearers or Thousand Suns. But if you're the person who chooses to bring along some Word Bearers or Thousand Suns instead of more Alpha Legion, be prepared for questions such as, why on earth would you do that? And are you an idiot? And ha 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 ha. And with that, there's our breakdown of the traitors. Generally, their tactics and rules seem more designed to be used in mixed legion lists, united under the eye of the War Master. Fitting for chaos as will be. It's your chance to make a rainbow legion of your favourite tactics, all in the service to the death of the false emperor. Fun times to be had by all, except the false emperor. I hope you're all having an excellent hobby-filled summer. I'm mostly parenting rather than hobbying, but I'm hoping to get some more time to paint soon. My pile of shame is building up again. Thanks as always to my sexy Patreons. If you fancy supporting the channel and getting one-to-one and group chats with me, as well as suggesting videos and occasional freebies, head on over. Otherwise, please do like and subscribe. We're still growing steadily, but it would be great to keep building an audience. And comment below, what's your favourite Traitor Legion? How are you planning to use them? Are you picking a pure Legion or are you going Rainbow Coalition? Let me know in the comments. Peace and love everyone. And as always, keep on lip bashing.